All right, today we're going to unpack an absolutely epic story, 5,000 years in the making. We're talking about one of the world's first true superpowers, ancient Egypt. It's an incredible tale of a civilization that literally rose from a single river, was ruled by living gods, and in the end, fell to a prophecy. Okay, let's get into it. We're actually going to start our story near its end with this really powerful prophecy. Years before it ever happened, the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, he foretold that his followers would one day rule over Egypt. That one statement, it frames our entire journey today, and it sets up a huge central question. So that's the big question, right? What was it about Egypt that made it so valuable, so pivotal, that its destiny was being talked about centuries before it came to pass? To find the answer, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Okay, let's wind the clock back, way back, 5,000 years. Before the pyramids, even before the pharaohs themselves, there was one single source for all of Egypt's power, its wealth, and its influence. See, in the ancient world, power wasn't really about gold or armies. No, it was all about water. And Egypt had the ultimate source, the Nile. If you controlled this river, you controlled food, you controlled trade, you controlled life itself. That made Egypt the single most valuable prize on Earth. So you've got all these people flocking to the Nile's banks, and then, around 3100 BCE, this leader, King Normer, does something absolutely revolutionary. He unites all the different settlements up and down the river, and in doing so, he forges the world's first unified kingdom. And what's amazing is that his story is carved into some of the oldest writings we've ever found, giving us this incredible window into that exact moment. So, with a kingdom now united by this incredible river, a whole new idea, a new ideology starts to take shape, and it's one that would define Egypt for thousands of years and give rise to monuments that, honestly, still blow our minds today. The pharaoh wasn't just a king, no. He was seen as a god in human form, a living god on earth. And this idea became the core of their entire religion. The only way for the average person to get to paradise was to serve their living god. It was a brilliant move, really. It ensured absolute loyalty and pretty much stopped any rebellions for centuries. But here's the catch. To stay a god, the pharaoh's body had to be preserved perfectly, forever. And this need led to the invention of mummification. It was a seriously clinical process. The brain was pulled out through the nose with a hook, organs were removed, and the whole body was dried out in special salt for 40 days before being wrapped. It was basically an attempt to engineer divinity itself. But pretty soon, just preserving the body wasn't cutting it. The whole thing escalated into a race for immortality. Pharaohs started competing with each other to build bigger, grander, and more eternal homes for their divine bodies. And that led directly to the creation of the pyramids. I mean, the scale of their ambition is just hard to even wrap your head around. Take the Great Pyramid built by Pharaoh Khufu. It's so enormous you could comfortably park 2,000 large trucks inside of it. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a statement of power meant to last for all time. To put that in modern terms, think about the tallest building in the world today, the Burj Khalifa. Well, in terms of pure mass, you would need 12 of them, stacked together, to equal the weight of that one single pyramid. Just incredible. But, and there's always a but, this obsession with building for eternity, it came at a huge cost. The very projects that were designed to show off infinite power, they actually started to sow the seeds of the empire's downfall. Think about it. Building on that kind of scale is unbelievably expensive. The national treasury was just being poured into these massive tombs. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the unstoppable Egyptian economy started to shake. The superpower was starting to show some cracks. Now, just as the kingdom is teetering on the edge of collapse, a young slave named Yusuf, who you might know as Joseph, he arrives in Egypt. Through an amazing series of events, he rises all the way to become prime minister, and his brilliant economic leadership is what saves the nation from ruin. His family, known as Bani Israel, they settle in Egypt and, over generations, become a really prosperous and influential group. But then, their luck took a very dark turn. A new nationalistic dynasty of pharaohs came to power, and they were afraid of the influence of these outsiders, so they stripped Bani Israel of their wealth, their rights, and then enslaved them. And for the next 400 years, they lived in just brutal bondage. So during this long, dark period of slavery, there was this one hope they held on to, A prophecy. A prophecy that would lead to a final, dramatic showdown with the 3,000-year-old pharaonic empire. A prophecy started to spread, and it reached the new pharaoh. A boy would be born among the slaves who would grow up to destroy his entire kingdom. Well, terrified, the pharaoh orders every single newborn male of Bani Israel to be killed. But one child, Musa, or Moses, miraculously survives. And in this unbelievable twist of fate, he ends up being raised inside the pharaoh's own palace. When he came of age, Musa went right to Pharaoh Ramesses and demanded freedom for his people. After a series of pretty dramatic events, the pharaoh finally agrees. So 600,000 people from Bani Israel leave Egypt in a single night. But the pharaoh, he goes back on his word, gathers his entire army, and chases them all the way to the shores of the Red Sea. Okay, but this is where the historical record gets really, really interesting. The story of Musa and the Exodus is a cornerstone of the Quran and the Bible, right? But it's mysteriously missing from official Egyptian records. So what really happened? So let's break it down. While the historical accounts differ on the exact cause, they both agree on one crucial outcome. The religious texts, they describe this mass liberation of the state's entire slave workforce. Now, the Egyptian records don't mention that, but what they do confirm is that right after the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses, the kingdom suddenly went into a catastrophic and permanent decline. Something absolutely devastating happened that shattered its superpower status forever. The fall of Ramesses and his army? Yeah, that was pretty much the beginning of the end. Egypt, the kingdom that was built to last for eternity, began the slow, irreversible slide into obscurity. And that set the stage for the prophecy from the very beginning of our story to finally be fulfilled. After Ramesses, Egypt just enters this long, dark age. For millennia, it was no longer a conqueror. It was the one being conquered. It fell to Alexander the Great and the Greeks, then to the mighty Roman Empire, which ruled it for over 600 years. And finally, a new power showed up at its gates. In the year 641 CE, the armies of the second Muslim caliph, Omar, conquered Egypt from the Romans. And just like that, the prophecy made by Prophet Muhammad hundreds of miles away and years earlier was finally and completely fulfilled. And this leaves us with one final big thought, doesn't it? The pharaohs built monuments to literally defy time. They truly believed their empire was eternal. It lasted for 3,000 years before it just vanished. So if an empire that was designed for eternity can fall, what does that say about the great powers of our own time?